CM 365, all about Carnatic music.
As far as any art is concerned, be it music, dance, drama or whatever, we see that practice is a must to achieve excellence. You cannot have just thousands of ideas running in your mind and expect yourself to achieve excellence in the chosen field. You have to work at it. Now, for example, I may have learnt a song from my guru. I may be able to understand all the nuances that he is communicating to me. But nevertheless, if I don't come home and practice it properly, I will not be able to achieve perfection of that song. Similarly, for example, on the rhythmic side, somebody may be able to recite very intricate korvais and kanakas. But only when you are able to translate those ideas into playing, that is on the mridangam dexterously, or any other percussion instrument for that matter, then only the whole thing achieves meaning. Otherwise, all of them are just like, thoughts which are there in the head. But then you need to really work at it and practice very hard in order to perfect it and achieve some excellence in that. And also we see that just knowing or learning all about the arts is something not really enough. We also see that many elders, they say, at one time of my life I learned the Navagraha Kritis, Navavarna Kritis, very rare Kritis, very rare Varnas and all. Now, it's good that they did learn, but then the point is that after that they never got to practice all that. So everything just remains there as part of their thought process only, and then because they never got to practice all this, it never came as a practical element from them actually. So the next what happens is that, for example, again, if you take a very simple example of the vocal production, voice production, we tell all the students that how to produce, where from the sound comes, all this explanation we give to our students, that when you sing the Adhara Shadja, it should have good resonance and it should have good depth. But as you keep moving from Sa to Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, Dani and to the higher octave, it is important that you soften your voice, you taper your voice, and you cannot shout and scream at the top of your voice when you sing in the higher octave as you would, the kind of volume you cannot give that you would give to the Adhara Shadja or something in the Mandra Sthai. So all this is something probably the student really understands when I am teaching. But then he has to go back home, sit and practice, analyze what I have said and practice it and see how the sound emanates when he says the Adhara Shadja, or when he tells the Tara Shadja, or when he goes to the Tarapa, how the voice actually has to be modulated. All this actually comes through practice only. We see many maestros and we really envy them for the wonderful voice they have and say, oh, what a beautiful voice, what a facile voice. This voice, everything, whatever they're thinking, it's able to speak or to be able to, communicate, we keep telling. But actually all that is not magic. They have really worked very, very hard on it. In fact, all the maestros, if you see, for them, music is their only life. So for them it is learning and then practicing, practicing, practicing. So that is all. In fact, we know of so many musicians who have been oblivious to anything other than music in their life. In fact, some of them do not even know what is happening in their family. To that extent, that kind of an involvement on the music itself as well as the practice is very, very important. And then we see that when we start learning something, there is always a problem. Because when we are introduced to something new, we are hesitant. Now here also I would like to quote an example of one of my students whom, 2 times I was able to observe. When I taught a composition in Kalyani, she was very happy to learn it because she knew the ragam already well. And she also knew a few compositions in that. So she was able to relate many things and get the thing easily done. The next I started a very rare composition of Swati Tirunal in the ragam Kannada. Now that composition also she has not heard all her life. Second thing is, of course, that Kannada is also new to her. So there was a lot of difficulty and hesitancy in terms of learning this composition. But then what happens is that through continuous practice, repeatedly when you're singing it, what happens is that the new thing becomes slowly, it starts opening up to you, and you start discovering the familiar aspects in that, and you start relating to it, So that's how this happens. And that is very important, because you can't be learning only things you know. You have to also learn things which you don't know, and then you have to make it your very own. I would like to share a few quotes on practice which I found very interesting. This of course applies to any branch or path of life, but in the context of music also it made sense, so I'm just sharing with you. We all know of the age-old quote that practice makes something perfect. That is, there is no shortcut to success. You have to keep on practicing and practicing and practicing. In fact, I've heard the parents of so many prodigies tell that how many hours, like, except for sleeping and eating, they would only be practicing all the time, even as children. So that is where, after a point of time, so much of practice has gone into it that the music becomes a natural part of them. There was another quote which was much more interesting in relation to this, where, it said that don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. This was even more interesting in the sense that you practice so many times that nothing can ever go wrong with what you have practiced in that particular lesson or that particular piece. You perfect it to such a level that you can never ever be wrong with that. So that is the intensity of the practice that they are trying to quote here. Another beautiful quote I just came to see is, if you don't make mistakes, you are not working on hard enough problem. And that's a big mistake. That is, making mistakes is part of the practice process. If you're going to go into untreaded paths, you cannot always choose the common path of everybody, then you will be another ordinary musician. So you have to choose the untreaded path, and you will be making mistakes if you're going into that area, because it's a new domain. But nevertheless, you have to make those mistakes if you have to develop that skill in that particular, whatever area you have chosen or the composition you have chosen. Another thing that I saw was, after a long time of practicing, our work will become natural, skillful, swift and steady. So for this level of excellence, practice is the only way out. Practice like you have never won. This is something I really loved. Practice like you have never won. Perform like you have never lost. This also shows the attitude of how an artist should be when he practices and when he performs. The two sides, how he has to develop his attitude. Once more I say, it was a very beautiful, thought-provoking thing to me. Practice like you have never won. Perform like you have never lost. And there was another quote, there is no glory in practice, but without practice, there is no glory. That is, when you are practicing, it is definitely a hard thing, because you have to get many things right by singing or playing on the instrument over and over and over again, and that requires a lot of patience, and you have to really focus a lot. So there is really no glory in that. But without practicing, you cannot achieve any glory in life. Then, practice does not make it perfect. Only perfect practice does. This is another very important thing, where some people, they say, I practice for 6 hours a day, I practice for 7 hours a day. It's not sufficient if you practice for so long. You have to put a perfect kind of a practice. That is, the practice should have a proper regiment in that. It should have a proper focus, and you should be very clear about what you are practicing and what you want to achieve through that whole practice session. So that is very, very important. So it's not like you, just because you practice 10 hours, you have done a perfect job. Every minute of the practice has to be purposeful and meaningful, and that is very, very important. Knowledge is of no value unless you put it into practice. As I said earlier also, you may have so many things in your mind, but you have to really practice hard in order to perfect it. And finally, success is less of luck and more about practice. So which clearly shows that when you look at somebody and envy them and say, aha, she possesses such a beautiful voice. This voice is traversing, effortlessly in the Tarasthai, Mandrasthai, Madhyasthai. It can bring out so many, spin out so many brigas and so many fast phrases. I'm really amazed. There's nothing to be amazed actually. What the artist has done is he has put in very, very long hours of sincere and focused practice. And that's why he's able to achieve this kind of a marvel. So thus we see that practice is very, very important in our art form, and only when you really practice hard with a proper focus, you can achieve excellence in the chosen field.
CM 365, all about Carnatic music.